Welcome, London. Welcome back to the Manish Tiwari Show. A very Merry Christmas to all of you. My show is an ode to London, to its multicultural inhabitants, to this great city, and the great tradition of having people from different faith, religions, cultures, and giving them a voice. Today we have in the studio someone I've known for a very long time. He's a banker. He's now also a counselor. Besides, he's someone I would describe as salt of the earth, a person who's connected to the grassroots, person who has helped many people, a person who is a great supporter of arts, culture, and everything which makes life worthwhile. He's a voracious reader. I believe he's also a good cook. So we have with us, gentlemen, in our studio today, Mr. Prabhakar Kaza. Mr. Kaza, are you there?
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Everybody. Thank you, Manish.
So, Mr. Kaza, thanks for being on my show. You're one of the few people I've known in this city for a very long time, since the time I've been active in public life in my own way. And I admire and respect everything which you've done, which you've achieved for yourself, for your family, for your community. Mr. Kaza, today, we are right at the cusp or right at the aftermath of the Brexit deal. And we are very well aware of the current financial, current implications of this financial scenario where Brexit is going to affect a lot of us. It's already affecting the way we're going to see things happening in this country. We're also in the middle of COVID. Thankfully, it seems to be coming to that point where we have now discovered the vaccine, and hopefully in the next 3 to 4 months, the pandemic should be a history. So at this moment in time, historically, we're at that stage where things can go good, bad, or ugly. Mr. Kaza, what do you think the Brexit and its aftermath is for the common people in this country?
Yep, thanks for that flattering introduction. And Brexit, of course, has been in the anvil for the last 4.5 years. The number one point of discussion in this country. I'm glad we got some deal. And like the slogan said earlier, some deal is better than no deal. Even though the government always believes the other way around. Now, we have a deal, of course, which says that there are no quotas, no tariffs, but there'll be checks on the movement of vehicles. There'll be the people can travel only for 3 months as a tourist to EU and vice versa. The issue of medical has to be settled on both sides. The next time I go to EU as a British citizen, I will probably have to take a medical insurance. And whomsoever I've spoken to in the last 2 days on this business matters, I've only expressed that they are to create more and more employment in UK to deal with the amount of paperwork and having to deal with all the 28 countries individually. And since there will be no EU-wide treaty, especially on services, so things are not looking that good. Much as posturing the politicians might do, much as I'm sure we're going to have a lot of bottlenecks, a lot of bumps on the road. So I know it's not the right time to give this kind of message, but we have to face realities.
But truth has to be told, Mr. Kaza. So, I mean, exactly. You reckon that the current deal which we have achieved, or our politicians have achieved for Great Britain, do you think it's in the right spirit? It's they've done something which they had promised. I'm not very well aware. I mean, I've only read or seen what's been they have promoted on television or what they have kind of spoken in terms of sound bites. So I'm not very well aware of the intricacies of it. And I was just hoping to hear from you if you knew anything better which might change the fortunes of the people of this country.
There used to be one old saying in most of the board meetings, that the smallest element of expenditure is discussed the maximum amount of time.
Right.
The same thing happened here. Fishing, which is supposed to be about 0.1% of our GDP, took away most of the time, created a lot of rancor between the countries, and went into lengthy discussions. In the same manner, if we are going to keep on discussing issues, we'll have more and more negotiators on our side, more and more on the EU side. And in this country, for 40 years, we didn't have anybody who negotiated a treaty as such, because EU did that for most of us. And when it came to only armaments or aspects not covered by EU treaties, or when it came to services, we had to negotiate special agreements with different countries. On trade matters, we are novices, if you ask me. And having said that, if we are getting into only temporary arrangements with countries, that is to continue what existed with EU. We'll get into firm agreements only later on. And there is the issue of always, standards for different countries. We are so far following EU standards, and things were going smoothly. Now, if you're going to have our own British Standards Association describing its own British standards for whatever reason, we'll probably get into more and more complications, more paperwork, more ways of doing things, and we'll have problems about acceptances when it comes to other countries. We are better off whenever you negotiate. If you are very firm, you can be very firm only if you are buying in bulk. EU was buying things in bulk and negotiating a better deal for the British citizens. But now, if Britain is going to negotiate on its own, then we've got a problem, because we don't have that chance of discussing in terms of buying, bulk discounts and things like that. That's going to be our major problem. We are in a weaker position when it comes to negotiation with anybody, for that matter. Political posturing is one, but ultimately, when it comes to trade treaties, it's very difficult to materialize what was promised on the buses before. We can make Great Britain again, agreed, but not this way. And I'm sure things will be more expensive, and we're not generally going to, the cost of living will go up. So things are definitely not going to be much better than what they were before. And this issue of having that sovereign pride that I'm going to control my borders, I'm going to decide my trade treaties, is a nice slogan to take up. But it doesn't materialize into realities when it comes to negotiating with other countries. That's where we're going to be stuck.
So, Mr. Kaza, I was listening to Keir Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, and he had very little to say, to be honest, because he said that, like exactly what you said in the beginning, is better than no deal, and so Labour Party is going to support it. But somewhere I feel that Labour has lost this opportunity to really stand up for the people of this country. There's been a bit of a lackluster performance in the last two elections, but also in public life. They don't seem to be getting anywhere in holding the conscience of the current leaders, of the Conservative Party, and they don't seem to be making a difference. As a Labour councillor, wearing your political hat, I would say, what do you think is going on? Why Labour Party doesn't seem to be cutting through this, confusion and chaos? And Mr. Kaza, we're going to take a short break, so
Okay.
you have this time to think about this question, and we'll come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Viewers, welcome back to the Manish Tiwari Show. We have with us in the studio today Mr. Prabhakar Kaza, a banker and a councillor currently with the Bournemwood and St. Elstree part of London, North London. Mr. Kaza, welcome back to the show. So
Thank you.
before we went back, before we went into the break, we were talking about the current political scenario and how Labour has not been effective in challenging Conservatives. And what we've seen here is that Conservatives have been in problems. There's been a lot of infighting, chaos, confusion. These are the, chaos and confusion have been the buzzword for the last few years because, one after other, the leaders have changed. Boris Johnson, the current Prime Minister, seemed to be doing well. Possibly because there's no real challenge to him. There's no real challenger to his leadership coming from the opposition, from the Labour Party, which traditionally has been very successfully able to put Conservatives in their place. So what are your views on this, sir?
One, if there is confusion in the Tories, there is confusion in the Labour. You can't avoid just one party having all confusion, the other party everything being calm.
Yes.
Two, Labour has to go away from the position that they took earlier in the time of Jeremy Corbyn on several issues.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And it has a membership of about 600,000. To sway them all to a different position takes time. Mm-hmm. That's one problem that Keir Starmer has got. The same thing goes with the demographics. To bring a whole lot of people to another side, Indians, the Afro-Caribbeans, the British for the matter. So it takes time, and you've got to do it very slowly and smoothly without offending the other side or other groups. The same situation comes up when we talk about Brexit, because Brexit has been the major problem for Boris Johnson. He has promised a whole lot of things, majority of them undeliverable. And he knows very well that people whom he promised are not liking what they're seeing. But then Labour cannot totally get into the position of saying, look, we'll give you something else, because there is nothing else that they can give as a party. It is not as if Labour can promise something now and deliver it in the next election. There is no such thing as that. You can only pressurize the government into negotiating better terms. Yes, that's all over now. They're like Keir Starmer said, now that they've got a treaty, the only alternative is to back out of it, but even that doesn't seem to be a good deal. So the best thing is to support what the government has taken. Over a period of 2021 onwards, Labour Party will definitely try to seize whatever they can in terms of votes from the Tory party's failures, especially in terms of Brexit, the chaos that it has caused, when you can see it on TV day in, day out. So the people are just waiting. Let us finish the new year and see 12 days of Christmas, and then you'll see a lot of things coming up.
Well, I do certainly hope so. What I fear here is that it seems like the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson's government seems to be setting up the agenda. And Boris particularly, he seems to be very good at setting the agenda from time to time, and Labour is like a cat chasing its own tail. There doesn't seem to be any consistent agenda setting coming from the Labour Party. It's more like the Conservatives have all the cards and they play one after the other, and Labour seems to be chasing something, and not very good at that, not very good at kind of counter-attacking or challenging what the Conservatives seem to be setting. And even in the last few months, sir, I've seen that there's been so many anomalies, like so many shortcuts taken since the time we had this pandemic outbreak. In fact, the Times and subsequently the Guardian, they have reported so many failures in terms of consistency in awarding contracts. Friends and families of major politicians have been given all the contracts. In my own experience, I've seen in terms of advertising and communication, there seems to be a select few who have been awarded all the contracts without any checks and balances. The government doesn't seem to be believing in any checks and balances, and money has been flowing out of the government coffers like nobody's business. I mean, there's absolutely no accountability. You could be in the right place at the right time with the right people and make millions out of this pandemic. So that is my judgment on this government and its way of functioning. But sadly, dismally so, Labour doesn't seem to have an edge or any real force, any real political maneuvering to counter attack or challenge this. And sadly also what I've noticed, sir, is that in the last few years a big section of the South Asian community, particularly the Indian community, but not just the Indian community, even the Bangladeshi community, which were traditional strongholds of the Labour Party, seem to be moving to Conservatives. They seem to be simply a lot more active and communicative. Why do you think, I mean, coming from the background and, understanding how the South Asian community has been supported by Labour in the past, why do you think they would move away to Conservative? What do you think is the attraction here? What do you think they're doing right, sir?
Yeah, to answer your question first, the first one about why Labour is not protesting everything that the Tories do. Labour does it, but if you keep on protesting, you become a party of protest, like some other major party has been called. And if you want to take on this 22 billion pounds that has been spent and 11 billion pounds spent on friends and relatives and cronies of the Tory party, I'm sure all these things will come out one by one. And not only that, this has been there all over the world, whether it's United States, whether it's India, whether it's any other country that you can think of. All COVID bonuses have been given to the cronies. I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do, but the opposition will take it up only after COVID has gone off. Because right now, people's focus is on how do we get back to our jobs? Right. How does normal life begin? When will my children start going to school? And when will my adult children go to colleges? So unless we come on to that particular situation, when COVID goes away, the entire Pandora's box will open. And I'm sure we'll be spending the next 3 years only on this business of trying to sort out the mess that has been created by COVID. When you speak about why Asian communities, Bangladeshi, Indians have gone away, it all starts with the previous leader that we had in Labour, which was also a good way of looking at human beings, that all human beings are equal, all of them have their own rights. And that should be the position for UK also, that as a government, that whether you call them in any country, when there is a division, that both the sides have their rights, human rights. This created a problem saying that, look, you want one group in Asia to have rights, then you are anti-Semitic. That went on started like a small fire, went into become a huge bushfire now. Possibly almost engulfing the whole party. The same thing could start off with something else tomorrow. I mean, politics is all about appearances. Politics is all about perceptions. Politics is all about posturing. It's not necessarily that the party believes in it, but it knows how to divide and rule and how do we get the votes of people. In the case of Indians, if you ask me, from what I can observe, the Indians who came in the 40s and 50s as part of the post-war construction effort for UK, they were all poor people. They were all factory workers and road builders. Now, when naturally they migrated to Labour, because Labour was the party which was seen to be the party for the underprivileged and the working classes. People who have come for the twice-born Indians who have come from Africa, Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. A lot of them did come with money. Some, of course, came as refugees. But over a period of time, they made good. They now have shifted from Labour to Tory. And if you see the people who have come in the 21st century, They're all highly educated people. IT carrying guys who speak only in bits and bytes. And with big contracts that they have, with six-figure salaries, very, very unlikely that they'll be voting for Labour. It's one is a problem of policies. The other is the fact that the people who are traditionally voting for them have shifted their economic class. That has resulted in a slight shift from Labour to Tory. You can probably dwell on this at the national level, but two of us who are in Labour in Borewood and Elstree have beaten our Tory rivals and taken their seats in 2019 May.
Mr. Kaza,
while it is true probably at the national level, it is not true at all places. It also depends upon demographics.
What I was going to say is, this sounds, Mr. Kaza, it sounds a bit like that if you're well-to-do, you're not going to support Labour. So by that logic, I mean, if we're going to do better economically, then we should be all moving to Conservatives. Is that what you're trying to say?
By and large, I mean, any of these statements, will be 80-20 correct. It can't be 100% correct. It's not that every one of us who need not bother about tomorrow's meal will vote for Tories. And everybody who's, a little depressed and who's on daily wages will vote for only Labour for all time to come. I mean, these things also depend upon the economic situation, about the time. And like I said, it's all a question of 80-20. You can't be all 100% will go in one queue. But by and large.
That doesn't sound good for Labour then, because if going forward, if we're going to prosper, then they are going to lose their vote bank. Is that what you're saying?
No. Going forward, the country is going down and down in terms of manufacturing. And as a government, we are now borrowed very heavily. 125% of our GDP is our borrowing right now. We'll have to service the debt ultimately. They'll be giving less and less to the benefit seekers, to people who are underprivileged. Like the way they cut down, first was Thatcher, the milk snatcher. Then we had the midday meal being cut off. You must have read about UNICEF feeding people in Sadak Council. So when you hear these things, to think that the Tory party will continue to support the underprivileged people doesn't exist. So they'll definitely shift wholesale to Labour. And people who see this, who have a conscience among the richer classes, will also vote for Labour.
Mr. Kaza, you also run an Indian forum on British media, and we heard the announcement that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson is going to be the guest of honor at the Republic Day parade in India in January, on January 26th to be precise. Do you think, this whole change in terms of how Brexit has unfolded and how United Kingdom has its trade relations in a state of flux is going to help further strengthen its relationship with India, and there will be a lot more trade happening between India and Britain? There's the bilateral relationship between India and Britain in terms of trade, business, and mutual growth. Is that going to increase? Do you think this is going to be the new normal in coming years to see?
David Cameron's visits to India started with the idea of, getting the vote bank from Asians, Indians in particular, because the number was going up, back to Tories. After that, the majority of our prime ministers have gone to India to increase their vote bank. But whenever we talk about trade relationships and Commonwealth and ex-colonies and that kind of stuff,
Mr. Kaza, we're going to go for a short break.
I always give the example of Glenfiddich.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Kaza, but we're going to go for a short break, and we'll be back very soon this time.
Oh, okay.
And we'll continue with this question. Thank you very much. We go for a short break. We'll be back soon.
7.
Welcome, viewers, back to the Manish Tiwari show. We have Mr. Prabhakar Kaza in the studio with us today, a senior banker and a councillor from the Labour Party. He's been answering all our questions today. Mr. Kaza?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
We're back.
We're back. So very quickly, how would you sum it up, United Kingdom's relationship with India? Do you feel optimistic that will grow further post-Brexit? Post this deal, do you think it's going to flourish, or is it going to be just another PR-able exercise, or as you put it, exercise to possibly satisfy the vote bank?
I know. See, there are very few things that EU was against buying Indian goods. Very few things. I mean, probably Amul ghee is the only thing that I can think of immediately, and Glenfiddich Scotch as such.
Okay.
Which British people have been, British trade delegation has been discussing for 10 years now. Okay. Whenever India discusses with Britain anything about trade, the first thing that they talk about is visas.
Right.
What about visas for our students, visas for our people to settle down there and work there? Unless we are in a position to satisfy India's thirst on these two issues, it will be very difficult to get a trade treaty which will satisfy UK. Otherwise, we'll probably get the same thing that we got from EU with same tariffs and no quotas. So, if you want to increase trade, there should be something that is being stopped right now by EU. But I'm sure nothing comes to anybody's mind right now. Look, right now I'm not able to buy this kind of item from India because EU has said no, or it doesn't satisfy EU standards. Okay, so yeah, interesting, because I've been hearing rumors that historic trade deal is going to be signed. So we'll wait for that till 26 January. Mr. Kaza, I'm going to ask you something about your role as a banker. I mean, you've been with State Bank of India for a very long time. You're still a banker. I'm very well aware that you represent one of the overseas banks, but your role with State Bank of India has been the longest. And State Bank of India is India's largest bank. It's a Fortune 500 bank. And you used to head the London branch, UK operations for a long, long time. What do you think is the role of Indian banks, or I would kind of expand that a little bit and say Indian financial institutions in the United Kingdom? Do you think they have a real role to play, or it's more ceremonial? They are here because there's a real need, or is it just an exercise in kind of creating brand India? What do you think? There are about 3-4 aspects to it. The major aspect, of course, is serving the Indian diaspora. And two, if we are not represented here as banks from India, the trade finance costs will go up. Because again and again, we'll have to approach HSBC, Barclays, Lloyds, RBS for any banking transaction. And Indian banks have been able to mobilize a large amount of deposits from Indians because if you notice, the banks from 80 countries in UK, about 400 bank branches in the city of London itself. The main reason being that most people coming from a particular country, the migrant feels more happy going to a bank, representing his country. Like if you're a Korean, you'd rather go to a Bank of Korea. Or the same thing with the Nigerian, if you will go to a Bank of Nigeria. Same thing with if you go to any of these Bangladeshi banks, you'll see a long queue. Same thing with Sudanese. So one, they find it easier to transact because their own people are there across the counter. And to be a global bank, the bank has to represent itself in several places. Now, if State Bank of India has got about 13 branches now, it's one of the bigger banks to be reckoned with. it's very difficult for any migrant bank to take on a local bank. I mean, I can't see a day when the State Bank of India will take on HSBC or vice versa for that matter. In India, HSBC will never be able to take on State Bank of India because you've got a much broader base, you've got have more access to funds, and you are able to lend cheaper, you have more products and services, more branches in any case. So the role is not ceremonial, the role is very useful, part of our diplomacy. The Indian banks in UK are something that you cannot totally overlook when it comes to UK banking. We were not even a percentage of it earlier, but now when somebody writes about banks in UK, they do mention Indian banks, which is a very satisfying thing to note.
Great. So definitely they've been there for very long. I believe State Bank of India is going to celebrate 100 years next year. They started their journey as Imperial Bank. In the last few years, I'm sure it's just not the last few years, but even before, but it's been quite noticeable in the last decade or so. Indian financial institutions have been under attack for alleged interference from the state, from the Indian government. And you have all the stories like the, now very famous or rather infamous stories of economic offenders who have left India and come to the United Kingdom. And there seems to be a common thread where they seem to have defrauded Indian banks and financial institutions with the help of maybe political interference or maneuvering, if I can say. Do you think Indian banks are like financially strong and have strong compliance and strong ecosystem where they can overcome such things?
See, one, if you noticed, in India, banks were nationalized as a part of implementing government's policies or the direction in which the government wants the country's economy should go to. So I wouldn't say the political interference was there for the last 40 years or anything of that sort, or even more. But the fact is that political interference is there in all the countries. In India, it's exposed, it's talked about. In UK, we don't even talk about it. But to think that our own ministers, our own MPs, or our own councillors, or whatever be of the rank level of politicians, don't interfere in banks, I can't believe it. You do get recommendations, you do, at least in major banks, you do, in the high street banks. Economic offenders, you'll always have them in all countries. And UK is famous for giving them a haven. Majority of them are diversions of funds. None of them actually started off as a fraud. I mean, whether you take any airlines, whether you take any diamond business, anything that has been highlighted in the British press, or has created a huge non-performing asset for Indian banks, it didn't start off as a fraud. It later on became a diversion of funds, whatever name that you might give it. It has created a hole in the banking industry. Having said that, you have so many companies becoming insolvent in UK, so many liquidations. They also create a big hole in the bank. In the bigger banks, if you notice, their final profits, 1/3 of it goes for provisions for non-performing assets. Whether they are created by inefficient employees, whether they are created by influence from politicians, they are created by economic fraudsters, or a matter of conjecture. But in India, one thing that happens is we have 1,000-odd newspapers, thousands of journalists, and everything is open, everything is public, everything gets publicized. So we have to reckon that also when we speak about the frauds that are being committed by these rich people. And India was always a land of sannyasis and swamijis. When they find somebody becoming rich, they would say, look, he became rich only by fraudulent means. So that attack goes on all the time.
Well, good to have this perspective, Mr. Kaza. We're coming towards the end of the show, so I'd like to utilize the last few minutes we have on the show on something a bit different. We discuss politics, we discuss banking, but I do know that you have supported a lot of institutions, particularly the South Indian classical music and arts. You know, do you want to talk about that? You've been part of some institutions in East Ham.
I'm glad finally from a profession you come to my passions. Of course, profession is also a passion. We do support a lot of these artists in terms of holding programs. We have held separate programs for MS Subbulakshmi. We have held programs only for a particular poet or a writer or a composer. We have had Purandar Dasa, we had Paparasam Sivan. We probably are the only ones who hold for the anniversary of Balamuli Krishna's death in November every year. We had for different artists. Now we are having virtually. We'll get back to the stage once it goes off. I also promote Indian women's cricket.
Right.
We are on the biggest Facebook page, 86,000 members. 86,000 members, and about 10,000 visitors every day to the page. So that's another thing that they do very passionately. We also represent an Indian forum on British media,
Right.
which serves as a watchdog on the matters that are reflected in British media, where something goes overboard. And we have had occasions where BBC or even Guardian, for the matter, have apologized to us and publishes. And of course, they publish a very small notification in some corner which nobody reads.
So Mr. Kaza, we're coming to the end of the show, and I don't want to lose out on the opportunity to get a message from you, because this is practically the last show for this year, and I'd like to have your message for the viewers in terms of what they can look forward to in 2021.
Yep, I'm really honored to be here on the last show. Great honor, Manish. Like Alexander Juma would say in Count of Monte Cristo, with COVID and other things, have Brexit happening, let's wait and hope. That will be my final message for everybody on the show.
Thank you, Mr. Kaza. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for this.
So let's wait and hope, viewers, what 2021 brings us. Definitely with a level of optimism, I would say, will be worth this wait. Let's hope.